Guys, so as promised, let's get into it. So this is the cycle advanced, making it a lot more clear for you to view and think about the actual cycle and to get you thinking about the labels already. Okay. So first and foremost, we talk about the momentum cycle. And this is the cycle that occurs on the V, the C, the C, the C, or however many C's you want, but ultimately on the V and the C as part of the EVC system. There's a momentum cycle. And very simply, what you have for the momentum cycle is you still have an overall cycle playing out. What I mean by that is every overall momentum cycle is going to start with similar cycles that we're used to, where prices may be coming down, maybe it's a major flush or something along those lines. It starts building some kind of longer term stage one, and all of a sudden we have this kind of sign of true momentum. Price starts to move higher, and as we've already learned about the averages, here they are in a much better light. The 5, 10, and 20 maybe start sloping upwards or a little bit upwards, which is that indication that money is coming in a way it prior wasn't. So we assume we are probably moving into some kind of momentum cycle because what's happened is we've come out of the accumulation MB. And this is actually the starting point for labeling, right? The accumulation MB. So on the momentum cycle, this accumulation MB is often the move out of the action over the 10 and 20 EMA and out of a stage one. So this is very important because the accumulation MB labeling is a little bit different regarding if we're on the entry time frame or on the V/C time frame. What I mean by this is oftentimes on an entry time frame, it might be the case that we would label the accumulation MB as something in here, or this one as well, maybe something in here, and this one as well, or maybe something in here, and one in here as well. However, when we're looking at a momentum cycle, and we're looking at a higher base time frame, so this is the V and the C, the actual labeling and what we consider an accumulation MB for where we're kind of coming out of is a little bit different. We're kind of looking at a larger MB at a larger area that is basically proving demand, right? A lot of the time what you'll see is, let's say prices come down to like a 10 and 20, just like what you see here, right? Prices come down into that 10 and 20. And ultimately what I'm more so interested in is a line like this. So a line that defines where kind of the stage one action is. So maybe something like this, or, maybe there's one that you can draw through here because, it defines this as most of the stage one. So the idea is as price moves out of this or comes above this line, so again, without having to draw the stage one and the whole box, as price comes out of that line, or in this case, this line, what it's doing is it's validating a potential accumulation MB. So think, maybe a candle like this, and then the candle closes. That is that sign of true momentum. The averages start sloping upwards. All those MA things are met that we've already spoken about, and that's where I would end up labeling my initial accumulation MB, right? So again, the accumulation MB is often the move out of the action over the 10 and 20 EMA. So that's what's actually being considered. It's the move kind of over the 10 and 20 overall, right? It's the move that kind of comes out of there. That's what's validating it. And as a result, it's out of that stage one. So again, very important because when we go to the E cycle, right, we know an accumulation MB, maybe the initial one could be, let's say this is price, and then these might be the moving averages. Let's say this is just the 20, maybe the 10 is somewhere here, right? And initial MB might be this thing, right? Maybe then this one right here, and that could be a tradable one, or it happens a little bit higher up, and then this one is the tradable one, whatever it might be. Even though they're very similar, even though they're both accumulation MBs and telling the same kind of story, we are more so focused on the overall stage one validation for a momentum cycle. So every momentum cycle is going to start, of course, no matter kind of where you look, or at some point through something like this, where prices, maybe flushed out, maybe they've come down, a major flush, whatever it might be, and then price comes out of that area and shows a sign of true momentum. As you've already learned, the moving average is sloping upwards. And this is where I personally label the accumulation MB. So if I look at any examples right now for myself, where I'm looking at this momentum cycle, which is never going to be on a 65-minute because that's my entry cycle time frame right now. The daily, you'll see where I label the accumulation MB. So blue for me is daily for validation. You can see I labeled it right here, which is that once price came out of what I supposed to be a relatively clear stage one, this was clearly the accumulation MB that kind of kickstarted this move. And from there, we're in momentum because at that point, so right there, if you look at price, right, we've started to slope everything upwards. We've come up over the MAs. We've come up out of a potential stage one or sideways. And as a result, that's the accumulation MB and hence the label, right? If we go to the weekly, you can see my accumulation MB is kind of this area here. Again, it's not a perfect candle. It's not the perfect candle here where it's like, okay, it needs to come right over that, which might be the case for an entry cycle. Instead, it's an understanding of where is most of the action trapped. It's kind of here. And I'm looking for price to reach beyond that point. So maybe kind of through or above this area. So maybe on this candle here, as it kind of closes above, you might be looking at this as an MMB1 to maybe catch some of this move, or simply just across the whole top here on this candle would validate this accumulation MB right there. So again, this is minor niche things that I personally do, that I personally look to understand what price is doing as it's moving from stage 1 to 2 across cycles, but the momentum cycle starts like that. And we can look at a number of examples just to make this very, very clear. If I go to NVIDIA, again, same thing. If you look at the white, where do I kind of label the accumulation MBs? So if I go like this, right, where's the accumulation MB labeled? Well, this accumulation MB in this case is labeled as price comes up and out of a potential stage 1 and overall this. Now, again, it falls back down. So what do you see? Right, after it kind of falls back down and loses the averages, even though you might have looked at that as momentum MB, but as it lost them, right, what did I do? You can see I drew another line kind of at and through like this high here. You could have also drawn something like this. So again, you're kind of thinking, because this line is defining a stage 1, like that's kind of a stage 1, or if I drew a line here, this is a stage 1, maybe something like this, right? Clearly, this is where that action is trapped. Think back to the information that you learned regarding stage 1s and 2s. This is kind of where that action is trapped. So as price kind of gets above it, basically on this candle here, the assumption is that, okay, we are likely moving into a momentum cycle because everything is now moving upwards and coming out of that stage 1. That's validating our accumulation MB. And actually, when I look at this, it probably makes more sense to label this thing right here as my accumulation MB as it comes out of all this. And I can honestly just do something like this, right? Because at this point, this is how I would probably view it, just to make it really simple. But that's where we're coming out of the accumulation MB, potentially validating a stage 1 and starting a momentum cycle, which we know is going to mean that on a lower time frame, a daily in this case, a validation time frame, we're going to be moving into that momentum cycle of that time frame. So for the advanced cycle, right, it's all going to start with the accumulation MB ultimately, right? And that's going to be the sign of true momentum. Now, upon that happening, this is the continuation of that true momentum. So think about this leg here as like this leg here. Ultimately, as that true momentum comes in, as we've already learned, selling will start to come in at some point, right? That is what we're interested in. That's what I'm interested in as a trader. As that selling comes in, how is that selling coming in? Is it drastic? Is it large? Is it sustained in a way where price comes to the 5, rising 10, rising 20, and gets bought up? If so, that's your beginning of momentum, of the momentum cycle, right? Here it is. This is literally it. This is the momentum cycle in itself, kind of labeled and shown in a much better light. What you have is it'll start with that accumulation MB, then you'll go through an MMB1, right? Price might move higher. You can see I kind of drew these little red lines across the top of price. What these are actually indicating is these lines right here that you'll see in gray for me. So this is this setting right here, which you can set to whatever you want. I don't like it to be super pronounced. I just like it to be a color that's not that is just not in the way. That is just very light, because I'm not I don't really. Here we go. Usually around 33%, because I don't need it to be like in my face. But ultimately, that's what those red lines represent, and it's just it's just showing you this because it's creating a measurement between each high that's helping you decipher and decide if something should be labeled or not, right? Because if this is MMB1, then this could be MMB2, but it's quite close. But if this happens, right, this and this are too far away from each other to be the same MMB. So clearly, this is at least some kind of MMB. 2. And then this one might be an MMB3, but then as this one occurs, you're like, okay, this MMB3 is clearly far enough from this. This could have been MMB2, so you might suppose that this was MMB1, MMB1, MMB2, MMB2, MMB3, MMB3, right, because it's happening at the same area, MMB4, MMB4, or failure, right? And in this case, that was the MMB4 that led to failure. But this is the momentum cycle in itself, right? We start off with some kind of accumulation MB, because it's still going through the overall cycle, but we're looking at it coming out of that stage 1. And then we go through the momentum cycle. And this is exactly what it'll look like in reference to the MAs in terms of good moves. What'll happen is the price will push. As the selling comes in and it's clean selling, it'll be caught on the rising 10 or 20 or just above, because we're using that 5 as our cheat code to understand how momentum can potentially form on this thing. Those are going to start doing what? That MMB1 is what? Well, think about it. If I draw this in, if I drew it in, here's that line until it went, right? Again, same thing I've already taught you. accumulation MB1, accumulation MB2, right? Again, if it was an entry cycle, sure, that could be a potential entry, but we're thinking about this momentum. So we're looking at the overall thing that's coming out of the stage one as the accumulation MB. And again, the next accumulation MB is already acting as a momentum MB, hence the labeling. And this is why we labeled the MMB1. So we understand where we are in that move. And that comes down, selling comes in this case to the 5, just above the 10. Maybe at the time, the 10 might have been here. Maybe, you don't know, because after this goes, then it kind of catches up and goes higher. Maybe you get your opportunities in here on your lower time frame and you're set, or it comes back, maybe takes you out or gives you another opportunity and you're back in here. Same thing. Price pulls back. As it pulls back, it comes to the 5. In this case, it catches up to the 10. It catches itself on the 10 and the rising 20 in this case, and once again moves higher. Then you might have this kind of thing where you're not sure, you just don't do anything because it's just uncertainty. Price goes higher and then goes sideways, and finally the sideways catches up with the 5. So you assume that rule that if this starts a move, the 10's probably going to catch up to it, which it kind of does here. And once again, this could probably be the MMB2, but both of them are like the MMB2. This is like MMB1, MMB1. Doesn't really matter how you label that. Moves higher, MMB3, right? So selling comes in, it's sustained selling, but it kind of comes down. In this case, it comes under the 5, kind of sideways 10 or upwards 10. And in this case, finds itself on the rising 20, moves higher. Again, these are not exact. It's not always going to do the 5, 10, 20 exactly like this, but it can be any one of them. This is what understanding behind how markets move actually looks like versus whatever the fuck the people online are teaching, where it's like, just find the thing that goes up and hits it perfectly. It's like, that's not how the market works, right? And then you might get the move off that then could make another kind of momentum MB or part of the momentum MB in that area that catches up to, in this case, the 5 or the 10, rising 20, starts moving higher. Again, same thing here. Price might pull back to the 5, and then because of the rule that you've already learned about the 5, maybe you get inside of there on a lower time frame, probably something like this, MB1, MB2, maybe a momentum cycle MB here, off the entry time frame. You get into that, right? And again, then you're getting in with the understanding of the 5, but then the 10 might have been like here at the time, and then it catches up to it because the move happens, MMB4. And then oftentimes after MMB4, you enter more of a either runaway market that you get to make a lot of money on, and that's what can happen, and it will happen. But then you kind of stop trading it because you don't expect this to continue. You just make money on the fact the move is happening, or it goes usually after that MMB4 move into more of like a back and forth, not very clear, builds maybe even a stage 1, and then breaks below to create a distribution MB. So kind of the opposite side of that, and might go through that cycle on the downside. But again, if you're using a higher C cycle, as you move up on the C cycle, it might just be the case that this is all part of the MMB1 of that C cycle, and that pullback is the MMB1, right? So that could lead to the next move higher. And what I've done to demonstrate that, so this is the momentum cycle in itself, is to demonstrate what it'll actually look like for a real market. And oftentimes it's something like this. So again, same thing as you saw before. Think back to this left right here, but most of the time, this is something more along the lines of what you'll see in reference to a market that's really, really good. Is that you'll get that initial move, MMB1, same rules that we just saw, moves higher, maybe still MMB1, moves higher, MMB2, or the next point is MMB2 as it comes to that 5, right? And then as it's at the 5, maybe you trade on the lower timeframes to get involved on your entry cycle, on your entry time frame. The 10 just catches up as it starts going higher, goes higher nicely. You might start assuming that MMB3 is forming, but then it completely fails down, and you probably view this whole thing here as some kind of stage 1 failure, and now it's a distribution MB. Kind of think this, but it just interrupted earlier. You kind of get this distribution MB, and then maybe you wait because you're aware that this is a higher time frame, context time frame MMB1, right? Because that's going to be a pullback to a context time frames 5, 10, rising 20, same exact thing as you saw before, flushes out. But notice how as it flushes out, important note, and why I made the note for you, these are not acting as MB1, MB2 accumulation MBs, or MB1, MB2 accumulation MBs. Instead, because it's a momentum cycle, we try to capture where most of that stage 1 action is happening. Think about the box, stage 1 section, stage 1 action is happening, draw the line across. As price moves beyond that, That's what we label and understand as our accumulation MB. Think back to the earlier thing, same thing that happened here. That's that accumulation MB. So it's restarting this move, but now it's happening within the context MMB1, just like we spoke about a second ago. That accumulation MB right there leads to what? Slope upwards on the moving averages. That's a demonstration of what? Demand coming in a way that it prior was not coming in. A huge demand on behalf of big money to sustain this move higher. As selling comes in, what kind of selling is it? The selling might be weak. If it's weak, what do we wait for? We wait for price to continue, to basically the composite operator to continue buying this thing up at the rising 5, 10, 20. Price gets to the 5, our cheat code rule is met. So we know that that means that as this thing starts to move higher, maybe it starts it really aggressively, that might catch up and look like it kind of got close to it, which is exactly what we're going for. Prices pull back to or just above the 10 and 20. That's the rule, which means they get to the 5. MMB1 forms, price moves higher. Price then starts to pause. Maybe an MMB2 starts to form, which means you might get entries inside of here on your entry cycle time frame. Then all of a sudden, the MMB2 might actually just continue forming. So this is an example where you take entries, but it's not the real move. It's not the real demand validation. So what happens? Price comes back to like the areas that you might have traded, or maybe you traded accumulation MB here, accumulation MB here, maybe you traded a momentum MB here, and it just comes back. This is why you don't fret or get afraid or get sad over the fact that sometimes prices come back, sometimes the analysis specifically in that moment is wrong, but the move can still be very strong and good. Price then pulls back. We know that this is the MMB2, but this is also the MMB2. So again, we're keeping in mind from that indicator that there's a high here, which means that if we get another one like up here, well, or like up here even, this and this are probably too far separated for this to all be MMB2. So we could probably assume this would be MMB3 if it happened up there. So again, same principles applied over and over and over again, but this is what it could technically look like. Price might then go, the MMB3 might happen, and it might not even be clear enough to trade, but it's clearly an MMB3 because price paused like in some way and then continued, all good. Price goes, starts making a potential MMB4, right? Comes to the 5, gets to the rising 10. Maybe you get a buy, it goes higher. And then all of a sudden, as it starts to kind of go sideways, either it takes off crazy or starts going sideways, you again envision and think about this as a stage 1 because you have it on both sides. And as price breaks down with like a candle, as it breaks down that overall move, you know that the underlying buying that was coming in is now breaking down, right? You have buying coming in and then buying failed to come in. The selling became aggressive. Maybe it came out of a stage 1 and that's a distribution MB. And again, as price goes sideways, you say, okay, maybe this area here is a 1, right? So maybe if price gets above there, it could be an accumulation MB or like something like this. If price gets above there now, it could be an accumulation MB. But then instead, price keeps kind of going sideways. This is all like a stage 1. So the low part of it is also important. And as it breaks down, that's a distribution MB. There's no reason for me to touch this. And it breaks down. So this is very, very much what most markets that are really good are going to operate like. And this is going to be the momentum cycle of that given market, right? And this is how you kind of label it and where the distinct differences between how you label those accumulation MBs are going to happen when it comes to the momentum cycle. So that's your momentum cycle. This is exactly how it operates. This is the simple version that you already saw, just made a little bit cleaner, made a little bit better. So it's very clear what we're looking for, how we're thinking about momentum, how we're thinking about money coming in, how we're thinking about accumulation MBs and labeling. And here's an example of what it actually tends to look like. And as a quick example, let's look at the example that I actually took. MSTR, this was that winning trade, a very big winning trade, which is why I'm using this as an example right now, even though you can apply this to multiple things. But what do you see? You're going to see the same thing, right? Price went through some kind of flush, was playing around here. Maybe this was a stage 1 at the time. So again, could you have labeled this thing here over that high in accumulation MB? Yes. In this case, selling started coming in, it started to potentially hold and just failed. There would have been no entry anyway. Remember, when you're analyzing, you are actually aiming to be wrong most of the time. Your analysis being wrong doesn't mean you're taking trades. It doesn't mean you're losing. It doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. This is very, very important because you are literally learning and teaching yourself to look at many markets. Most markets are going to be bad, fail, not be clean, not be clear, not be tradable for you specifically. And your analysis is almost always going to work out poorly. That's the point of trading. That's how edge extraction works. But the beautiful thing about what we do as traders is that we are not trading analysis, right? We're not making money off our analysis. We're making money off the entries we take based on analysis playing out. Very, very important. So analysis starts to fail or not hold up or doesn't do the things you want it to do or doesn't do the momentum cycle stuff you want it to do, no entry occurs. Nothing happens. Analysis starts to play out, but then fails. Maybe entry occurs and you take a break even. Maybe entry occurs, you take a loss. Analysis starts playing out, and doing very well. Entry starts playing out, managed well, plays out, and you make a fuck ton of money. And again, not financial advice. This is the beauty of trading. You start to recognize that it's not about being right. It's about taking an entry when everything starts to actually align. So again, when we look at this, yes, for anyone watching this, they're like, but what about this accumulation MB? That's an accumulation MB. Notice how it would not have given you any entry. And just to even prove it really quickly, right? Let's go inside of that area right there, right now. I just want to show you all this right now, right? Here you are. That's that accumulation MB. Started off that stage 2 move on an entry cycle, flushed out and did what? Maybe MB1, potential MB2 for an entry? Nothing. Maybe MB1, potential MB2 later for an entry? Nothing. No entry, fails down. The analysis is completely wrong. The accumulation MB did not hold up. The momentum MB that started to form didn't do anything. And yet, no money was lost. Very, very important. Write this note down. Your analysis is not the determiner of your profitability. Very, very important. Because a lot of people start to give up when their analysis fails. But the reality is most analysis will fail. You guys want to know of all these markets here, which one I made the most money on? This one right here. You want to know what everything else did? Most of the time, yeah, I might have made some money on it, but a lot of the time it was just -1s and break evens or no trades at all, and I'm still waiting. Took one market for me to make 25% on a trade, right? That's what you have to think about and understand. So let's go back here just for a second. Let's go back to that MSTR because I wanted to show you the example of the cycle as a visual rather than only using what you see right here, which is just the image. But this is the general delivery, and I want to show you that now so you can compare it for yourself. So let's go to MSTR here if it wants to load. That would be really, really nice. Reload without saving. MSTR. Daily. Move it over to the right. So here we are, right? So yes, accumulation MB just failed down. Then again, right, I'm looking at this flush, right? It's clearly a flush. You know, there's some kind of stage 1 here. Price moves above that. So I assumed at the time this was an accumulation MB. And you know, we spoke about the rules here for the MMB versus accumulation MB and the tiny things in between. But ultimately, right, this could have been your stage 1, and you might have been like, okay, this is what validated the accumulation MB. That's my accumulation MB. And then price kind of goes into a momentum MB here, but doesn't really hit the 5, so I kind of waited. And then boom, right, price sells down into the 5, which is the rising 10, rising 20, momentum MB1, price moves higher. Think about that red line that I drew in the momentum cycle drawing. That's that red line. The next one happens right here. That could be momentum MB2 or still momentum MB1. That is preference. That is understanding of how the move is happening. I thought this was MMB1 too, or it was MMB2, which I actually thought it was MMB2 because of, you know, it was a little bit further away and it was happening higher up, which is fine. But then when this one started happening, I'm like, this is still part of that same move. So again, this is why the label's here. Nonetheless, right, you see the exact same thing that I walked you through here. The good markets are going to support the moves. The selling that's going to come in is going to be bought up. Demand is going to come in. And this thing is going to continue to prove itself and give you those opportunities as a result. So MMB1, selling comes in, buying comes in. Selling comes in, but it's weak. Buying comes in, so it moves higher. Same thing. Selling comes in, but it's weak. Comes to the 5, so we assume the 10 might catch up. So it's on the rising 10, rising 20. Momentum MB, price moves higher. Maybe then, like I said before, price actually sells off, and any entry you might have taken here, guess what? It might even end up break even. It might have ended up as a small win and then a break even, or for some of you, based on your management, it might have become a loss. Again, that's just it just depends on your management. That's perfectly fine. The move is still clear. Price starts to sell off. The sell-off is met with a weak sell-off and clear buying. The buying happens where? First at the 5, then the rising 10, rising 20. What's going to be inside of here? Well, there's going to be a full cycle, an entry cycle playing out. Price moves higher. pauses again. Clearly, this is within the same little dome, this little house, right? So again, when I look at this high, I think of it as a house. It's still within that house. Okay, so this is still momentum MB of this, but that could be an opportunity. What's going to happen in here? You're going to build up accumulation MBs, maybe even a momentum MB. You'll get an opportunity. It'll move higher. What's the next expectation? Price starts to sell down. The selling is weak. The selling is met with buying. Where is it? Rising 5, 10, 20. As it does so, we expect to move higher. That's MMB3. Price moves higher. It pauses again. It's kind of in that same area. I assume that's a momentum MB3, but if another one happens now, it's probably MMB4. What happens? Price moves substantially higher. Selling starts coming in. What is the selling? Is it large? No. Selling comes in. It gets bought up at the 5. Price just gets to the 5. So we assume that if money is going to come in, the 10 is going to follow up. Exactly what we want to see. We're in MMB4, so there could be opportunity there. Lower time frame sets up the opportunities, moves higher. As it makes that MMB4, I manage more aggressively because of where we are. Price breaks down, and now what am I? I'm completely sidelined. Why? Because I'm expecting this to build that stage 1, right? That's going to go into some kind of full distribution MB. I'm still expecting this thing now to chop around and do nothing, break down, and maybe start building a much higher time frame. So if I delete everything just for a second, a higher time frame what? Well, there's a momentum cycle here. Here's your accumulation MB out of this stage 1 right here. Right, stage 1, which is why I draw the line like that. That's your accumulation MB. Here's your momentum MB1. That's all we have. Price kind of moves higher, takes off, and now we're maybe making a momentum MB2 over some time. Maybe as I'm looking at this, because it's very large, right? Maybe it sells off for a bit, builds a very nice sideways action, and then creates opportunity later. That could be in multiple weeks. That could be in 3 to 4 weeks, 3 to 6 weeks. That could be 2 months for me. Who knows? But that's what I know I need to wait for now. But that means that the daily needs to now go into its distribution MB, which is my expectancy, right? I expect that because that is part of the cycle. That's an example of the move that I took here from momentum cycle that is meeting the exact things that you just saw. Notice how I am literally waiting for opportunities that are in line with that momentum cycle. It's very important. Let's look at something else that I've traded. So I personally just traded Tesla as well. Now I can go back in time. This is very important. I can go back in time and do the same thing on a lot of these moves for you and walk you through the step-by-step of the same momentum MBs and the same thing, right? So if we really wanted to, if I just can delete everything here so it's not in the way. If I really wanted to, I can go back here and go through the same thing. Price went into full distribution mode, distributed, start to build whatever this is. Started to build some kind of stage 1 here. So I would say that as price kind of got above this high, basically right here on this candle, so making it very, very clear, that was like, that was likely your accumulation MB, right? Accumulation MB, we don't label it with a number, right? Then what? Price kind of sold off, but it didn't even reach the 5, so I didn't label this as an MMB, but this is an MMB, but it's also an accumulation MB, right? Just depending on how you want to do that. Price moves higher, starts building a momentum MB. Momentum MB is built, price moves higher. Momentum MB2, it starts getting built, right? Big selling comes in, then it kind of plays around. Then you get this thing under the same little house, so same high, right? So momentum MB2 is being built. So the idea here is, okay, maybe we're starting some kind of move through this point. This is where we look for opportunity. We look for opportunity. Maybe it's not super clear, right? Continues building the same kind of momentum MB, still very clear. Opportunities come in the form of accumulation MBs. As momentum MBs starts to move, price then goes sideways. So if this was momentum MB1 and this is momentum MB2, then this is still probably momentum MB2 because of how it's like where it's happening. So this and this are very close. So we're assuming they're happening as part of the same move. Accumulation MBs, followed by momentum MBs, entries, price moves higher, and it pauses. Clearly momentum MB3, expected to move higher. Right, momentum MB3, price starts to move higher. Wait for one more probably, moves higher. We expect the next one to be momentum MB4 if it's still nice selling. It is, it's perfect. Wait for it to get to the 5 at least. It doesn't really, I probably would have ignored this, but this is MMB4 now for me because clearly it paused even though it was not clear for me to potentially take an entry. So what's the expectancy? This either now takes off or fails down into the new distribution MB. So now this should build some kind of distribution MB. And that's what it does. all of a sudden it goes into like a potential stage 1, and this builds a distribution MB, or you might even wait even more. I'd probably wait even further for this to build like a distribution MB through this low. Boom. Distribution MB gets built, which means now we might go back into the other side, because this is now part of a weekly momentum cycle, because this is a daily, it's my V. This is part of the C going sideways. So like this is now what I would see as a stage 1. So above this would probably be the accumulation MB. This would now sound the alarm that the momentum cycle is a go. Averages are sloping upwards. We came out of that stage 1 after distribution MB within a bullish market, within a bullish delivery. We assume momentum MB, assume momentum MB, assume momentum MB, but it fails with big selling, falls off and goes back into distribution. We wait for accumulation. We wait for accumulation. Price kind of starts a little accumulation here, right? Stage 1 gets above kind of this point. That's what I would see as the accumulation MB. This validates it. So kind of this area here, or starts validating it. Because again, yeah, it starts validating it. Wait for some sideways. Sideways comes in. Maybe there's a buy inside of here. You start getting in buys. You're in. It's looking really good. Starts going sideways again. Maybe this sideways takes you out of this, but this is still part of that same momentum MB. So you start looking for buys, right? Still looks fine, I would say. Breaks down, so we wait. Probably wait for price to get above these points. Yep, wait for price to get above those points. You know, if I'm looking at the stage 1, if I ask myself, where's most of the orders? Kind of like here, right? Price can get above that. So again, nothing to do. This becomes useless action. Price gets above. That's a momentum MB. Sorry, that's accumulation MB. We assume this is now going to start a momentum cycle. Same thing. Price kind of pauses. Maybe it's part of the momentum. Maybe it's not. Pauses again. Start looking for longs. Start looking for longs, part of the same momentum MB. Same thing, right? This could still be multiple break evens, right? And then maybe you get inside of this or this and it never stops you out on a lower time frame. And again, you get a beautiful delivery. And then you get the same kind of trade as MSTR. Now recently, right, I traded this, so I want to walk you through the recent cycle that it's going through. And again, this is the beauty of having access to a lot of markets. You can go back and do this for yourself. You can literally see all this stuff go down over and over and over again. But what did I trade here? Well, let me show you, right? Price flushed out. Stage 1, price got above it. I assume that's the accumulation MB. Price starts to sell off. It sells off cleanly into the rising 10, rising 20. Beautiful sell-off. Assume MMB. If there's opportunity here that you took, I missed it, but if there was, great. Ends up playing out beautifully. MMB2, same thing. Beautiful selling. Comes up. Beautiful selling. We spoke about this trade specifically in some of the prior portal videos, and you saw firsthand how these could lead to an easy break even though it failed. But as it started to come down, how did it do so? Very cleanly, still part of MMB2. And what did I do? I assume a lower time frame is going to go through accumulation MBs through the cycle. And I traded the accumulation double MB off that cycle. And if it had instead maybe taken off and then went sideways here instead for momentum MB / accumulation MB, I'd probably trade it through that, right? Because that would be like the opportunity that I'm looking for, and it's on something that I want to trade. Okay, so again, same exact thing. Everything moves through these cycles, or at least the good things do. And I want to make that really clear, because what I'm doing as a trader, what you should be doing as a trader, is you're extracting EV out of the clearest things for you. So what you're doing is you're scanning the market, you're looking through the market for opportunities that are in line with what you know will make you money, because it's clear as to what you've tested, and it's clear as to the cycle that you're learning, that you're following, or the kind of moves that you followed before. Right, so that's what I'm doing when I'm looking across all of this. Now, again, if this ends up failing completely, right, maybe it starts going on Monday and then it fails completely and it's just useless, guess what? My entire analysis of this move is completely wrong, as most analyses will be. But again, and I want you to remember this, the analysis is very far separated from your actual results, because results come from entry taking. Entry taking has its own aspects, right? Risk management, not taking dumb entries just because you want to, right? So the analysis has a very small part to play on your overall profitability, because your profitability comes from the entries you take from analysis that is actually good. Most analysis is bad, right? So that's just something to remember. And yeah, I mean, these are just a few examples just in front of you of this exact same thing happening over and over and over again. And these are the moves that I want to trade, right? And then, NVIDIA, this is an example you've seen a number of times throughout this portal material. Same exact thing. Go back to the move that I traded. I traded right here personally. Look at what happened, right? Price came out of what I thought to be the stage 1 here. That's an accumulation MB. Boom. I suppose that would then start a momentum MB, which it did. Price moved higher. Momentum MB. I traded it here. I believe I traded this price here or here, right? Same thing. Selling came in on a rising 1020. Very clear selling that was weak with clear buyers still stepping in as part of a higher time frame. What? A higher time frame momentum cycle that was really clean as well. So what do? I suspect that I want to be able to trade this, and on a lower time frame, I get positioned, and beautiful. I was part of this move. Now, I wasn't part of it all the way because I had poor management at the time. I literally closed most of my trade here. But again, this is an insane move. This is crazy opportunity, right? That's absolutely insane opportunity. And now take a look at it, right? Where is it? Is it in an accumulation MB? No, right? It went through stage 1. Now it's in distribution. So what am I going to do? I'm not going to touch it. I assume the weekly is still building its momentum MBs, right? Let's take a look at this. It is. So as long as it kind of sustains a clear, not strong selling, so kind of this weak selling, while buyers come in at the rising averages, what's going to happen? The daily is going to go from a distribution MB, which it is in right now, into later accumulation MB somewhere here, start a momentum cycle, and that's where I'll be someone that wants to be a participant. This is the beauty of understanding cycles. So that, as the advanced part of the cycle, is, for you guys, the momentum cycle. This is this simple version right here, where there's nothing more to consider. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, it's easy. This is what it actually tends to do. Sometimes it's 1, 2 into failure. Sometimes it's 1, 2, 3 into failure. Our goal is to stick to the stuff that is consistently pumping out clarity, right? Because the stuff that's clear once, twice, 3 times is the stuff that's going to remain clear until things fundamentally completely change. And if they do, we walk away from that market. This is the beauty of trading. This is what true edge ends up looking like. Okay. That's the momentum cycle that we apply to the V, the C, and the C, and how the labeling as a result of that looks like. There you are. Let's go to the next one.